In 530 BC, Cyrus the Great died, probably during a military expedition against the Massagetæ in Central Asia. He was succeeded by his eldest son Cambyses II, while his younger son Bardia received a large territory in Central Asia. Until 525 BC, Cambyses had successfully subdued Phoenicia and Cyprus and was preparing to invade Egypt with the newly created Persian fleet. According to legend, Cambyses II conquered Pelusium using a clever strategy. The Egyptians considered certain animals, especially cats, to be sacred. They had a cat goddess named Bastet and would not harm them under any circumstances. Cambyses had his men carry the holy animals in front of him to attack. The Egyptians did not dare to fire their arrows for fear of injuring the animals, and so Pelusium was successfully stormed. This would be an early form of psychological warfare. Pharaoh Amasis II had died in 526 BC and was succeeded by Psamtik III, which led to key Egyptian allies defecting to the Persians. Psamtik positioned his army at Pelusium in the Nile Delta. He was defeated by the Persians at the Battle of Pelusium before escaping to Memphis, where the Persians defeated and captured him. After a failed attempt at rebellion, Psamtik III immediately committed suicide. When Herodotus came to visit, the surrounding fields were littered with the bones of the fighters. He noted that the skulls of the Egyptians differed from those of the Persians in their greater hardness, a fact which he believed was confirmed by the mummies and which he attributed to the fact that the Egyptians shaved their heads from infancy and the Persians they covered with folds of cloth or linen. Darius I comes from another branch of the Achaemenid family. By Cambyses II, Darius was made his personal lancer. Darius accompanied him in this capacity in 522 BC on his campaign against Egypt. There Cambyses is said to have learned that his brother Bardia had risen against him in the Persian heartland and the capital Ecbatana. Cambyses doubted his brother's treachery and had reason to suspect his murder. He set out immediately to put down the rebellion, but died during the retreat, probably in an accident. Herodotus also hints at the possibility of an assassination attempt. Cambyses II died under mysterious circumstances in Syria on his way from Egypt to Persia. Bardia II, son of Cyrus II, and thus the younger brother of Cambyses II, became king of Persia. But before his Egyptian campaign in 525 BC, murdered. The secrecy was completely successful, so that the magician and high priest Gaumata, Herodotus describes a magical resemblance between the two, was able to pose as Bardia during Cambyses' absence, deceive the court and have himself crowned king. The second son of Cyrus was murdered by a Marduk priest. In modern research, however, it is considered quite possible that the alleged Gaumata was actually Bardia, who was not murdered. Thus, the depiction of Darius would only have been a justification for a usurpation. To avenge Cambyses, Darius returned to Persia and was able to enlist 6 childhood friends to overthrow the false Bardia, a certain Gaumata. He had to fight a total of 19 battles and defeat 9 rebellious lying kings in order to finally become ruler of the entire Persian Empire. Some Iranians are said to be celebrating the festival of magician killing today on September 29th. Darius the Great, he was from 522 BC. Third great king of the Persian Achaemenid Empire. At the same time in Persis, the native land of the Persians, a man arose who also claimed to be Bardia. There was renewed unrest in Elam. Serious unrest and fighting also occurred in Media, Parthia, Assyria, Egypt, among the Satyrids and again in Babylonia. Towards the end of 522 BC, almost the entire Persian Empire was in turmoil. However, Darius could rely on a loyal military force led by close confidants, so that, according to him, within a year the uprisings were put down one after the other. Asina was the first rebel leader who, shortly after the overthrow, took the lead in an uprising of the Elamites and proclaimed himself king of Elam. He was killed by Darius personally. At about the same time, Nidintabel claimed to be the alleged son of Nabonidus in Babylon and proclaimed himself king under the name Nebuchadnezzar III. He was captured and executed by Darius in September 522 BC. The first uprisings in Babylon followed, which, apart from a short interruption, lasted until December 521 BC. CHR. In May 521 BC, Nebuchadnezzar IV proclaimed himself the new king of Babylon and was killed almost 7 months later by Darius, like Nebuchadnezzar III before him. Other so-called lying kings followed, all of whom were beaten, staked, or crucified. Darius I, alongside the empire's founder Cyrus the Great, is considered the most important king of the old Persian Empire. One of his achievements was the renewal of the imperial structures. His administrative reforms were considered exemplary long after the end of the Achaemenid Empire. Perhaps they even influenced the organization of the Roman Empire. He also promoted the arts, especially architecture. The founding of Persepolis and the construction activity in other residential cities, especially in Susa, bear witness to this. In the history of the Achaemenid Empire, the reign of Darius represents the phase of greatest expansion of the empire. After the end of 521 BC, when peace was restored in the empire, Darius I devoted himself primarily to the internal renewal of the empire, especially in order to exclude a situation like the one he had just endured in the future. The empire was divided into uniform provinces, so-called satrapies, which were hardly based on the previously incorporated empires, but were primarily tailored to the individual peoples. In addition, numerous other reforms were carried out in administration, economy, society, and the military. With the campaign of 513 BC, the Persians came into closer contact with the Greeks for the first time since Cyrus' Asia Minor campaign against the Lydians. Although many areas of the eastern Mediterranean populated by Greeks were under Persian rule, the Persians had very little interest in this country. When, in the course of the subjugation of Thrace, Macedonia also became a vassal of Persia, the independent Greeks believed that they would soon come into the gaze of the great king themselves. Athens tried to prevent this by concluding an alliance with the Persian Empire in 506 BC. On the Persian side, this was understood as formal submission. The northern border of the empire continued to be threatened by the Sakin. After several large-scale military actions in Central Asia failed to produce a decision, a campaign was launched against the Scythians living on the Black Sea coast, which perhaps had the aim of stabbing the Central Asian Sacs in the back. Although the Scythian War was a failure, a new satrapy Thrace was won in Europe and the border of the empire was pushed forward to the Danube. This brought the empire into direct proximity with the European Greeks. In particular, the Persian advances in the Mediterranean and the Aegean and the subjugation of Macedonia may have caused concern in Greece. An alliance offer from Athens in 507 BC was seen by the Persians as a formal subjugation of the city-state. In 499 BC, finally, a rebellion broke out in the Greek areas of Asia Minor against Persian rule. Greek rebels took over in 498 BC, the former territories of Lydia and Sardis, and burned the city. This Ionian revolt, which temporarily extended to Cyprus and also caused the secession of Thrace, was ended in 494 BC. It was crushed and the leading city, Miletus, was destroyed. In the following years there were two Persian punitive expeditions in the Aegean region, the beginning of the so-called Persian Wars. 492 BC Thrace was conquered again. 490 BC, the city of Eretria, which was allied with Athens, was captured and destroyed. A Persian army eventually landed in Attica with the intention of taking Athens. However, this was thwarted by the Battle of Marathon, whereby the Persian venture can be seen as a punitive expedition rather than a real invasion, and subsequent Athenian military operations. According to Greek sources, in 486 BC, a new campaign against Greece was planned, but this did not take place due to an uprising in Egypt and the death of Darius. after the first Persian invasion of Greece failed. The successor of Darius, Xerxes I, 486 to 465 BC, initially neglected Greece's western border, but then decided to invade Greece in 481 BC to undertake another campaign. After initial successes, Athens, which had been evaluated by its residents, was taken. The Acropolis was destroyed as an act of revenge for sanctuaries destroyed in Sardis. This venture also failed in the battles of Salamis, 480 BC, and Platae, 479 BC. The Greeks, led by the Athenians, now went on the offensive themselves and liberated almost all Greek cities in the empire in the following decades, i.e. especially on the west coast of Asia Minor, formerly Lydia, from Persian rule. Sparta, until then the leading Greek power in the Persian War, was not interested in operations in Asia Minor, so that Athens now had the sole leadership role in the fight against the Persians. Athens finally organized a real alliance system, which soon turned into an instrument for preserving Athenian hegemony, the so-called Athenian Naval League. The Persians themselves remained defensive and limited themselves to trying to keep the Greeks out of the empire's territory. Not until 449 BC. A peace was concluded with Athens, the so-called Peace of Callias.